Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching The World Report. Let's first take a look at the headlines. A US judge orders Donald Trump to be sentenced on the 10th of January in his hush money case in New York City. The date falls just short of 2 weeks before he's set to be sworn in as president. Trump previously attempted to use his presidential election victory to have the case dismissed. This president-elect responded on social media and calls it an illegitimate political attack and refers the case to nothing but a rigged charade. Republican Mike Johnson survives a razor-thin vote to remain House Speaker. In a drama-filled, highly anticipated vote marks the start of a complete Republican control of Washington. Johnson could only afford to lose 2 votes because of the tight margins of control Republicans have in Congress. Donald Trump previously endorsed Johnson for the role, saying a win for Mike today will be a big win for the Republican Party. The Joe Biden administration notifies Congress of a proposed $8 billion arms sale to Israel. Washington maintains its support for their ally, whose war with Hamas has killed tens of thousands. The deal would now need approval from the House of Representatives and Senate committees. Reports state that the deal includes monitors for fighter jets and attack helicopters, as well as artillery shell, small diameter bombs and warheads. Decorated Green Beret shoots himself in Tesla Cybertruck before New Year's Day explosion outside Trump Hotel. Notes say 37-year-old Matthew Liversberger called the stunt a wake-up call for the country's ills. He wrote of needing to cleanse his mind of the brothers I've lost and relieve myself of the lives I took. The outgoing administration of President Joe Biden has notified Congress of a proposed $8 billion arms sale to Israel, with Washington maintaining support for its ally, whose war with Hamas in Gaza has killed tens of thousands. The deal would need approval from the House of Representatives and Senate committees and includes munitions for fighter jets and attack helicopters, as well as artillery shells. The package also includes small diameter bombs and warheads. The State Department did not respond to a request for a comment. Protesters have for months demanded an arms embargo against Israel, but US policy has largely remained unchanged. In August, the United States approved the sale of $20 billion in fighter jets and other military equipment to Israel. The Biden administration says it is helping its ally defend itself against Iran-backed terrorist groups like Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen. Washington, Israel's biggest ally and weapons supplier, has also previously vetoed UN Security Council resolutions on a ceasefire in Gaza. We're first joined by a guest. We have Mohammed El-Dashan, who's the director at Oxcon Fragile States Consulting. Mohammed, I'd like to ask you about what the impact of this deal could be. We're looking at a situation where there are potentially going to be up to $8 billion worth of military aid in Israel's hands. What impact could this have, not just in Gaza, in the ongoing conflict, but also across the region?
Thank you for having me. Well, it is quite unfortunate that the Biden administration seems, to want to see this genocide through before it leaves. On the ground, we've seen an escalation of Israeli strikes on Gaza the last couple of days. I think over 140 people have been killed in Gaza in the last 48 hours. So it has not been a happy new year there. The increase of arms sales is more of the same, and you do mention that it's fighter jets, munitions, and fighting helicopters, which begs the question of why they need that against a population that lives in tents, essentially. But it's interesting that the Biden administration is trying to cement its pro-Zionist credentials, as it were, because that deal will inevitably pass through the houses, wouldn't it? And, given that we're hearing ramblings from the Trump incoming administration that they actually want that war over, so it's because, as we remember, Trump's Middle East plan was a lot more about normalization, forcing diplomatic relations between some of the Gulf countries and Israel, as you might recall, with the Abraham Accords and so on, and all of that is kind of dead in the water because of this war. So the Trump's administration would love to sort of close that war chapter and move back to its own plans. Um, so there might be a little bit of concern on the part of the Israelis that, well, perhaps Trump will hold down the sales and export of weapons. Um, the Israelis have attacked numerous countries in their vicinity, and we know that, although as far as Yemen, um, and it is possible that they're trying to, for lack of a better way of saying it, to get as many kills as possible before the Republicans come in, and then it will be a potential new deal, and then we'll see. I don't expect they will change anything really. I think that the onslaught and the genocide will continue unabated. But there is definitely that little concern of what might happen, and that's that little uncertainty that is making both the Israelis and the Democrats power through the violence. Over.
We're also joined by Aaron Levarko, an Israeli television and radio correspondent. Aaron, I'd like to ask you what you think these weapons will be used for and on what front, and what will be the impact in any war that is going on currently, and a push for peace. We're looking at Gaza, where, of course, peace talks have been ongoing. Does this signal a change in path from pursuing peace, or is this just a continuation of the ongoing conflict?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Um, it's hard to understand why the Biden administration has changed its policy. Sometimes they wave a carrot at Israel, sometimes they wave a stick at Israel. This seems to be a carrot. It seems to be helping. But in the rules of war, there are things like that are called preemptive strikes, preemptive attacks, and there are also what are called preemptive defense forces. And I would imagine that the Biden administration, the military leaders, are looking into all these factors, looking at the nature of the war, looking at how the war began. And you asked, part of your question was, in regard to peace. And yeah, as far as my understanding goes, going back to 2005, when Israel pulled out of the Gaza Strip, that was a massive step for peace. That definitely was not a genocidal decision. Giving land to the people of the Gaza Strip, the Palestinian Authority, helping them with water, helping them with aid, that is definitely not genocidal. And then on top of that, on October the 7th, it definitely wasn't Israel that started the war. I think everyone in the world by now, everyone knows that Israel didn't start. They were partying, actually. They were partying on the morning of October the 7th. So, and then on top of that, to actually even consider this to be a genocide, when 17 of the top judges in the world got together at The Hague, and all 17 of them unanimously declared that this is not a genocide. In fact, the population of Gaza Strip is increasing. So if it is a genocide, if it is, then it's a really bad genocide.
Mohammed, can you respond to those comments that we've had there, and just sort of provide an alternative perspective? We have, of course, seen reports from multiple organisations of genocide and more weapons and potentially fighting for more months. What do you think the scene on the ground is in Gaza? Is that the reality that they're seeing? And how do you think these weapons could impact that, and how could conditions worsen?
Well, I think my co-panelist is sort of doing the regular thing of muddying the water, and bringing us back to definition issues with a few inaccuracies along the way. Just very quickly, just because it's worth saying, 2003 was the deadliest year to Palestinian children, and that is before October. Like there are reports that were published, I think, 1st, 2nd of October 2023 by Amnesty International and others, that this was the most violent war, the most violent year for Palestinian children. So let's not, let's not try to make a case that, wait, they started it, this is insane. And a lie. It started in 1948, but the numbers from 2023 before October just confirm that. So that's one thing. On the ground, it would be, just take a second looking at the number of casualties, if anything. We are talking, I mean, in the intro you said tens of thousands of victims. And if I'm not mistaken, the Palestinian Ministry of Health, which has the most conservative numbers ever, which are the ones that are actually used by Israeli government briefings. That's the figures that they use as reported by Haaretz. All of that, I mean, not only are they the most conservative numbers, but it doesn't account for what you call the multiplier, which is all the people who die from their injuries, but also from communicable, non-communicable diseases, lack of water, lack of food, cold, etc. And studies, as reported by medical journals like the Lancet and others, tell you that the multiplier of that is 3 to 15 times X the numbers of direct death. So if you want to talk numbers, then we're talking easily 500,000 people would have been murdered in Gaza. And I mean, I think it's worth letting that sink. 500,000 people they've killed. That's more than the entire population of the country of Malta, for instance. And the last thing about the ICJ, the National Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court are both pursuing Israel for genocide and war crimes. I'm not entirely sure what the gentleman was referring to. It is very clear that the genocide continues unabated. There are so, I mean, like with, anyone following Israeli press, Israeli media, or what's left of it, will tell you that there are very vocal sounds within Israeli society and the Israeli government about settling the Gaza Strip, about creating settlements for people in the northern part of it, and clearing it for that purpose. So the genocidal intent was never a secret. And it might be worth looking at the definition of genocide. By the way, it doesn't include murdering every single one of the group that's being targeted. But creating the conditions for creating the condition to have them killed, kind of like destroying every possible hospital or destroying water supplies and so on, all of that falls within the definition of genocide. So this is, I'm glad that we took a couple of minutes to talk about it, because it is worth reminding the audience that this is what we're talking about. And despite that obvious attempt at a red herring to move the conversation away from the fact that strikes are increasing and people are dying in increasing numbers, and I expect higher number of casualties in the next 2 weeks. But the fact that that some people are trying to take us to who started it and what is the definition of a genocide according to whose dictionary is obscene.
Aaron, one thing we do know is that a sticking point in any peace deal, any ceasefire deal, is the hostages that are being held, the Israeli hostages that are being held dead or alive by Hamas. How much closer do you think we can get, and do you think these arms will help get closer to a point where Hamas can agree to release the hostages and get us closer to peace within the region?
I'm sorry, were you asking me or Mohammed?
Yes, I was asking you, Aaron.
Okay. Yeah, you're asking. No, that's no problem. You're asking all the good questions and all the tough questions. Look, I think until now, the negotiations with the leaders of Hamas have been very, very difficult. Very, the families of the hostages, they get their hopes up, then they get their hopes dashed. And it's putting pressure on our population, and it's definitely putting pressure on our left-wing liberals who will do anything they can to get our hostages back. including laying down our arms and our weapons and giving up land. And our enemies, they know that this issue is causing division among the Israeli population. Now, our present government, who are not left-wing, they are more right-wing, to put it mildly, their policies are more, you know, we need, kind of almost like Donald Trump's policy coming into power, peace through strength. Peace through strength. And so, you know, the negotiations, they seem to be really going nowhere, because the demands, the compromises, they're kind of two different worlds apart. Hamas are asking for a full withdrawal, a full laying from Gaza Strip, even from places in South Lebanon. And Israel aren't ready to do that until the threat has been fully taken away. And so it seems that the bridge is too far from both sides. Now, again, if, you know, to go back to Donald Trump, he made a statement about, what is it, a week and a half ago. He said if the hostages aren't released by the time I come to power, if I can quote him, he said, all hell will be let loose, or something like that. So that's some pretty strong words for the elected president of the United States. I really, I want to see the hostages released. I want this war to finish. Everyone here wants the war to finish. Everyone here wants peace. The big issues are at what cost? What is the danger? What is the threat going to be? From Israel's point of view, is can we trust the leaders of Hamas and the leaders of the Palestinian Authority, who it's just come out this last week, by the way, that there were a number of members of Fatah, who are the other party in the Palestinian party, along with Hamas, but there were members of Fatah who were guilty and perpetrators of the October 7th massacre. And it really was a massacre. We're hearing...
Aharon Levako, apologies to interrupt. We are unfortunately out of time. Thank you so much for joining us. Also, thank you to Mohammed El Dashan. We will, of course, continue to bring you all of the updates from across the Middle East and within Gaza. But we now move on to the investigation of the Tesla blast that took place in Las Vegas, which has taken a major turn. The new letters found on the phone of the driver have raised several questions. He has called America an ill nation and expressed pride in his actions. Here's a detailed report.
There has been a shocking revelation in the investigation of the recent Tesla Cybertruck explosion in Las Vegas.
One letter in particular, as you can see here, this is an excerpt from that letter. He says, fellow service members, veterans, and all Americans, time to wake up. We are being led by weak and feckless leadership who only serve to enrich themselves.
A soldier who blew up the vehicle left notes saying the New Year X explosion was a stunt to serve as a wake-up call for the country's ills. Matthew Livelsberger also wrote in notes left on his phone that he needed to cleanse his mind of the brothers I've lost and relieve himself of the burden of the lives I took. According to what he wrote in one letter, he wanted to make a point by pulling a stunt with fireworks and explosives. The letters covered a range of topics including political grievances, societal problems, and both domestic and international issues, including the war in Ukraine. Investigators are still trying to determine whether Livelsberger sought to make a political point with the Tesla and the hotel bearing President-elect Donald Trump's name. But officials said Livelsberger wrote in one of the notes that the country needed to rally around the President-elect and Tesla chief executive and Trump advisor Elon Musk. Bureau Report, NewsX.
Now time for some updates from across the world of business. The US Department of Justice asks the Supreme Court to reject Donald Trump's request. The law requires ByteDance to sell TikTok's US assets or face a ban by January the 19th. Trump requested more time after his January the 20th inauguration. He proposed a political solution. The courts will hear arguments on January the 10th. TikTok has not yet commented. President Joe Biden has blocked Nippon Steel's proposed $14.9 billion acquisition of US Steel, citing national security concerns. The December 2023 deal faced political opposition, with both Biden and Trump pledging to block it before the November 5th elections. Once a dominant force in US Steel now ranks 3rd domestically and 24th globally. US manufacturing showed signs of recovery in December, with production and new orders rising. The ISM Purchasing Managers Index reached a 9-month high, but the outlook remains uncertain due to potential tariff hikes. Despite the improvement, none of the 6 largest manufacturing sectors grew, and survey comments highlighted concerns like volume decreases and significant slowdown. Microsoft plans to invest approximately $80 billion in fiscal 2025 to develop data centers for training AI models and supporting AI and cloud applications. This investment comes amid a surge in AI demand since OpenAI's 2022 ChatGPT launch. The focus is on expanding AI infrastructure and data center networks to meet growing computing power needs. Nisha Desai, an Asian American businesswoman, has filed a lawsuit against PayPal alleging racial discrimination. She claims the company's $535 million investment program, which limits applications to Black and Hispanic applicants, cost her millions of dollars. The lawsuit, filed by Desai and her New York-based firm Andav Capital, is part of a larger movement among some conservatives to curtail diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in corporate America. The US Surgeon General Vivek Murthy called for cancer warnings on the labels of alcoholic drinks. Consequently, shares of European and American spirit makers and brewers fell on Friday. He said in an advisory that the consumption of alcoholic drinks increases the risk of developing breast, colon, liver and other cancers. For certain cancers, evidence shows that the risk of developing cancer may begin to increase around 1 or fewer drinks per day. That is all we have time for. We'll be back with more of your latest breaking news updates from across the world.